Assalamu alaikum and hello guys, this is Jem here and this is my video on the chapter of biodiversity and classification. So in this chapter we'll mainly focus on biodiversity and yep, in this video. Okay, let's get into biodiversity. What is biodiversity and why do we need biodiversity? So biodiversity is the measure of the variety of living organisms with a particular habitat, ecosystem, biome, or all over Earth. Variety of living organisms. Remember that it is the measure of variety. What was the variety of living organisms? That was variation. And we learned about that before. That variation is the variety of different organisms in a specific area. Now, biodiversity is the measure of the variety. Okay, it's just the measure of the variety. So, biodiversity is the variety of living organisms within a particular area, habitat. Habitat is an area, is a surrounding, and ecosystem, biome are all over Earth. Okay. Um, Remember that there are several reasons why we need biodiversity, because if of course it helps to maintain stability of health of our ecosystems, and as each species they play a unique role in the ecosystem. It also provides us with a wide range of resources, such as food resources, food, medicine, raw materials, and it helps to regulate Earth's surrounding. And let's get into the levels of biodiversity here. We can see on the screen that um, there are four levels: species diversity, habitat, intraspecific, and interspecific. These two ones that are in the last one, you can call them as one, just as genetic diversity, but then there's two levels of genetic diversity too, which are intra and inter. Okay, so you can count them as one. I mean, just for information, so you can say that there are three levels of biodiversity. One's a species diversity, one's habitat, and one's genetic diversity. Okay, so what is species diversity? It is the number of different species within an area. Species. Remember the definition of species. Species was a group of organisms, a group of similar types of organisms that can interbreed and that can form a fertile offspring. This is the definition of a species. So the number of different species, that means the number of different types of groups of organisms, okay, in a specific area is called the species diversity. Habitat diversity, the number of different habitats in an area. And remember that you can see this is a habitat here. This is one habitat. Okay, this is an area, so this is one habitat here. So you can say that you're given a specific area, and there are different types of habitats in that area. So the count of those habitats is therefore called habitat diversity. After that, intraspecific genetic diversity. Uh, Intraspecific genetic diversity is the diversity within a species. Intra means within, right? Intraschooler activities, so within the school. So intra, inside. I mean between, right? And between the groups that are present inside. Inter means outside. So inter means external, right? Between two different organizations, you can say, if you're talking in general. But inter-specific, that means the diversity of genes between species, between two different species. If you're talking about intra, that is between one species. If you're talking about a seagull here, so it's gonna be between the species of the seagull, right? And if you're talking about overall, if you're talking about intra, it can be between a seagull and a, it can be between a seagull and an eagle maybe. So this is the difference, right? Okay, or it can be between seagull or fishes. So that is interspecific genetic diversity. Now let's get into types of the the reasons and the types of genetic diversity. Okay, so there are two types of species. Uh, there are two types of species. What do you call it? Biodiversity levels. The reasons why biodiversity, uh, the ways in which biodiversity can take place. So, species richness and evenness. Species richness and species evenness. We can say that like that. They're two different, right? So, species richness and species evenness. Species richness. What is species richness? So, it is like it is the number of species within a particular region or habitat. It only measures the number of different species, but not the number of individuals in each species. It doesn't focus on the number of individuals in one species. It only counts how many species are present. I mean, one species of a cheetah, one species of a maybe a hippo, and one species of zebra. These are three different species. And now, how many individuals are in one single species? That is not counted in species richness. What is counted is how many species are present there. Okay, so we can measure species richness through a technique called random sampling. It's a method we use instead of just counting the number of individuals. We use it so that we can just count the number of species and not the individuals. So what is species richness? It is the number of species within a particular area, the count of the number of species in a particular area. So if there's individuals with only 10, I mean, if there's a species with only 10 individuals and there's a species with 100 individuals, they both will be counted as two different species. They won't be counted as the number 2 being 100, so it's more so it's more richer. No. If they both are together, I mean, they're two different species, right? So they both will be counted as one. I mean, they both will be counted as separately, and they won't be, I mean, they won't be, differentiated because of the number of individuals they have in them. Now, what is species evenness? That is the count of the number of individuals in each species. So it's just, I mean, it's you can say that it's it's different from species richness because in species richness it was the number of species. Here it's the number of individuals in each species, and this is also found by random sampling. So species evenness we can develop by using species evenness. We can develop a distribution of all the species in a region, as well as how equal their populations are. So if a species have similar number of individuals, then species evenness is considered to be high. Remember that if species even I mean if two species they have similar number of individuals, right? So there will be a high number of species evenness because they both have the equal number, yeah, right? Just look at the name evenness. Evenness means being at the same level. So if there are two species and they're even, they have even number of individuals. That means that there's more species evenness. I mean, it's high, right? And if the species have varying number of individuals, then species evenness is considered to be low. So, I mean, of course, if there's a lot of differences between the number of individuals in each species, so what will that lead to? That will lead to the species being uneven, and that will decrease the species evenness. It just goes by its name. Okay, so I now let's compare here. See, in population A, there are two types of species, right? One seagull, one fishes, one frogs. Population B, there are only two types of species here, fishes and frogs. Now, what's the difference? Two species. Another difference is that there are different. I mean, there's a variation in the number of the species, right? They're not the same. One is four, one is three, one's one. That is a lot of different. Here, they're almost equal. One, two, three, four, five, six, seven, 8, 9, 10. I mean, you can see the numbers. They're almost falling at the same limits. And here there are three different, and they all vary in their numbers. So we can say that the population A has a more species richness. Means that there are more species here, more number of species here, so its species richness will be more. Because we don't count the individuals in species richness, we count the number of species. So there are more number of species here than B. So we'll say that species A, population A, is more rich. I mean, it is species richness is higher in um, A than B, and in B you can say that the species evenness is more than this than population A, right? Because they're almost the same number in population B. Because we count the number of individuals in species in evenness, not the number of not the species numbers. Okay, okay, let's go. Now we're gonna learn about the factors affecting biodiversity, and number one in that is the human impact on biodiversity. This is really important because humans these days have had an overall very negative effect on the biodiversity of Earth, and this is because of different stuff. I mean, hunting, agricultural development, cities developments, and environmental development. I mean, different environments and population, of course, a very dangerous thing to be taken in notice. Pollution, right? So, and all of this has, overall caused a reduction in the biodiversity. Has led to the decrease in the biodiversity, and this has to be conserved in some way. So let's see the example of farming here. Farming has led a very um, it has caused many several problems for us because farmers they use techniques for maintaining or maybe maximizing the food production. So therefore, farming has caused a really negative. I mean, itself it has caused really dangerous effects on the environment. Let's see. Number one, deforestation. Deforestation is a very major, major impact of farming, a major impact of farming on the environment, and this causes a lot of, loss of the plants and the trees. So, what is deforestation first? It is the clearing of forests or other habitats such as glaciers to make way for human settlements and farmland. So, human settlements can be for buildings, can be for cities, and farmland. The major thing that deforestation is used for is these two: human settlements and farmland. Okay, so uh, deforestation ruins habitat. Of course, I mean the biggest impact of habitat destruction is due to deforestation, and loss of habitat results in loss of shelter, loss of food, loss of water, and other resources that other organisms need to survive. I mean, they need for their survival. For example, humans, other animals, they need plants for their survival. Deforestation causes loss of plants. The loss of habitat, which happens due to deforestation, causes extinction. So habitat destruction, leads to extinctions and die-offs. Die-offs, really important term. Die-offs here of different species in the ecosystem, and this leads to the loss of biodiversity, which puts the ecosystem in a state of poor biological health, of course. And number three, because you can see loss of trees leads to soil erosion. Soil erosion, we learned about it that soil erosion when tree roots they hold soil in place, and without tree roots, what happens is that rain and wind can remove the soil from the area, and which causes loss of nutritional value of the soil, and which affects the growth of plants and the animals that conserve the plants. I mean, consume the plants. So of course, if nutrients are lost from the plants, the the requirements of the animals. I mean, they require nutrients in their body, right? And when these nutrients will not be provided to the animals, this will cause a very negative effect on the animals. So not only the plants are being destroyed, but the deforestation is also, I mean, affecting the plants and the animals both on a large scale. And eventually, when animals are not, even the animals are not treated, and I mean, they're not fed properly. What causes that is that there can be a lot of problems. There can be loss of appetite for humans too, because when animals will not be fed properly, humans, there will be a decrease in population of animals, and this can cause, I mean, of course, we see here, can causes extinction. When animals start to extinct on a long-term scale, it will cause a lot of effect on humans. So, yep. I Other reasons: pesticides, herbicides, and selective breeding. Um, so in pesticides and herbicides, you always know that uh, pesticides and herbicides kill pests and weeds. They're not only, of course, pests and weeds are both part of nature. And when nature is disturbed, of course, something will happen in a wrong way. So kill pests and weeds. Um, Not all weeds are harmful. There are many weeds. I mean, of course, it's an ecosystem, right? So everything goes by each other. It's a whole food chain, right? One organism conserves other one conserves other. There are lots of preys and predators. So of course, if you're using pesticides, it will kill a lot of insects. It will kill a lot of weeds, and there are other animals that use these weeds and that eat these weeds and insects. So it will affect the whole food chain. It will affect the whole environment. I mean, it will affect the whole ecosystem there in that particular place area, and therefore it will have a really negative effect on the environment over there. Other than that, a few of these herbicides are really toxic and can affect animals of the ecosystem. Not only, I mean, insects and plants, but it can also directly affect to the animals because they contain chemicals that can be really dangerous for animals. I mean, when they inhale and when maybe they consume the plants that have pesticides and herbicides in them, it can be really dangerous for them. And eventually, what is the end effect? Decrease in biodiversity, extinction. Selective breeding. Um, Selective breeding is a really interesting topic. I mean, it means choosing plants and animals with the best traits, with the best characteristics. I mean, with the dominant characteristics that humans require. I mean, of course, for example, if a cow can, milk in a large quantity, they will select the cow with the highest quantity, and there will be a specific type of trait for this. So choosing the best traits and breeding them more over and over again, this is called selective breeding. And however, this leads to a loss in genetic diversity of farm animals, which leads to a loss in biodiversity. This leads to a loss because we can know that when there's less variation. I mean, you're repeating the same traits over and over and over again over generations. Um, uh, this will cause disease in the. I mean, of course, if there's a disease that is spread in the same generation, it will affect all of the generation there because all of them are the same. They all have the same genes. Maybe there's a genetic issue that starts in the um, uh, in the generation in the same generation, and all of them are the same now. So what will this cause? This will cause a complete wipeout of the animals there, because all of them are the same, and there's a genetic disease that's going on there. So it will affect all the similar types of organisms there, and this can cause a lead in. But what is the meaning here? They mean here that because there's less variation, there's no variation. Therefore, they're gonna, when the same are gonna be uh, when the same organisms are when the same what do you call it? When the same generation is going to be same traits are going to be repeated over and over again. There's going to be very less variation, and therefore we'll lose many different species of animals. We'll only be getting one species, not species, sorry, I shouldn't say species. We'll only be getting the same traits. We'll lose many variations. We'll lose many other traits. We'll lose many characteristics, and therefore it will, of course, cause a loss in the population because we're losing many other characteristics. We're only focusing on one characteristics, and we're just repeating that over and over again. Okay. Use of fertilizers can lead to eutrophication. Eutrophication is a process in which the seas and the rivers are affected. I mean, aquatic animals are affected. Uh, the animals inside the seas and the rivers or whatever. So, so you can know that when fertilizers are used by the farmers, uh, what is the job of fertilizers? They promote good crop growth, right? So when this happens, when if there's rain in that area, so this fertilizers that are present inside the fields, they will be drained out of the fields. When this happens, by the rainwater, of course. So when this happens, it can go to the nearby water bodies. I mean, of course, there can be a maybe there's a pond, just from lower levels to higher level. There can be a pond there. There can be a river there. There can be a lake there. There can be anything there. So what this causes is that this promotes the um, this promotes the growth of the algae over there, algae on the plants. Okay, and when they come on top of when they come on top of the water, so there's very less sunlight for the animals present inside, and there's really less oxygen, therefore, and eventually it leads to death. But there's another way here that there's a nitrogen spike. They can, I mean, there can be ammonia. Ammonia is created by nitrogen, and this ammonia that is present in the fertilizers, they can go inside the seas. When this happens, there's a nitrogen spike, and when there's a nitrogen spike, it mixes with the food of the animals. It mixes with their breathing. I mean, they breathe inside water, right? So of course, it's gonna affect them. So nitrogen, ammonia are toxic to other aquatic organisms. Of course, we learned that ammonia is a really toxic compound. That's why our body even breaks it down. So remember that ammonia is a really toxic compound, and it can really affect negatively to the organisms present inside um, um, the area or the water body. I mean, of course, our body breaks it down to ammonia to urea because it's really important. It can be fatal to us. Just like that, it can be fatal to animals. Overgrowth of plants. The overgrowth of plants removes oxygen from the water. And when this happens, I just told you guys that when oxygen is less available, of course, the animals that are present and inside the water will get less oxygen and therefore eventually might die. So this causes also a decrease in biodiversity. This is all due to human effect right now. We're talking about farming. So modern farming is unsustainable. Of course, after all these results we've seen of just farming, we can. There are multiple other ways. I mean, I told you pollution, uh, construction of cities itself. Causes a lot of chemicals to be created inside the mills, maybe inside the furnaces. So this is a whole, a lot of a really destructive process, a really unsustainable process which needs to be decreased. So a loss of genetic diversity increases uh, suspectibility to a disease. It can wipe out large numbers of plants and animals, resulting in severe shortages. I told you guys about this too. That of course, if there's a disease that spreads in the genetic line of a single type of organism, and you're repeating the single type of organism over and over again, therefore it will cause the whole genetic. It will cause a genetic disorder in the animals, and due to that, the whole not only in animals but also in plants, and this can wipe out the whole population. Soil erosion can affect nutritional quality of soil. And when soil erosion affects soil, I told you guys that nutrients are lost and therefore it can also affect the animals that are eating the plants of the soil. And this is very you know difficult then, because when nutritions are lost, they can't find the nutritions, and therefore they might lack in one type of nutrition, and that can severely affect the animal. Just like us, we need protein for muscle building, right? What if the proteins decrease from the plants? Animals will not find protein, therefore they will become weaker, and it will become harder. It will also affect us because we're getting animals that are we're getting food that is what do you that is deficit in a specific type of a nutrient, and that will lead to us being deficit. So, of course, conserving wild species. Conservation of wild species of domesticated animals allows for genetically diverse population of animals that can be used later on. Genetically diverse means genetically different. The number, the count of different variations. So allows for genetically diverse population of animals that can be used later on. The same thing that I just told you, that it indirectly affects us, right? So preventing deforestation. Of course, deforestation causes soil erosion, and preventing that is really important for us. And therefore, certain areas are protected as SSSI. SSI is sites of special scientific interest. We don't need to only prevent specific sites, though. We need to prevent every single site for safety of animals, for safety of us. So conservation and preserving habitats. Land and habitat preservation promotes biological diversity, which ultimately helps domesticated plants and animals. So this was all for today's biodiversity chapter. Thank you so much, guys, and I hope you guys enjoyed it and understood everything. Till then, till next time, see ya.